For 2 solid weeks, 3 of the best horsemen in Territorial New Mexico had tried everything they knew. And the stallion had beaten every single one of them. Not beaten them in the way a horse sometimes gets the better of a rider in the first few rounds before eventually being brought around. Actually beaten them. Sent 2 of them over the fence and left the third sitting in the dirt of the corral with a broken wrist and a look on his face like a man who had just been informed of something deeply unfair about the universe. The stallion stood at the far end of the corral after each attempt and watched whatever was happening in front of him with a kind of dark, alert intelligence that the ranch hands had stopped making jokes about somewhere around day 6. It was not a dumb animal that kept winning. That much was obvious. It was something else entirely. Douglas had been watching all of it from the fence. He was not a man who lacked confidence in his abilities with horses. He had broken difficult animals before, and had a reputation in that part of the territory that he had earned honestly, not through self-promotion, but through results. He was good at this work, and he knew he was good at it, and watching 3 competent men fail at the corral had given him a clear picture of what he was dealing with, and a clear picture of how he intended to handle it. He was ready to step in. Then the Apache woman arrived. Her name was Shima, and she came through the property on a trading journey with 2 other riders in the late afternoon of the 15th day. She stopped at the fence while her companions continued toward the house, and she looked at the stallion for a long time without saying anything. The animal was standing at the far end of the corral in that same watchful posture it had held through every confrontation, and Shima looked at it the way someone looks at a thing they have seen a version of before and recognize completely. Douglas watched her watching the horse. He did not say anything either. She stayed at the fence until dark, and then she went to sleep with the other travelers near the south barn. She was back at the fence before sunrise. Douglas had come out early to assess the animal and found her already there, sitting on the ground on the outside of the fence, with her back against a post and her eyes on the stallion. Douglas asked her what she was doing. She told him she was sitting. He could see that much himself. He asked her what she intended to do with the horse. She said she was not going to do anything with it. She was going to sit with it. Douglas looked at the horse. Douglas looked at the woman. He decided he had no immediate response to this and went to do his morning work. He came back 2 hours later. Shima was still sitting outside the fence. The stallion had moved. It was no longer at the far end of the corral, but standing closer, facing her, its head lower than Douglas had seen it at any point across the previous 2 weeks. He came back an hour after that. The horse had moved again. It was standing near the fence now, directly across from where Shima was sitting, close enough that a man with a long enough reach might have touched its nose through the rails. Douglas did not say anything. He went back to work. He came back at midday and found Shima in the same position she had occupied all morning, cross-legged outside the fence, relaxed, unhurried. The stallion was standing with its nose pressed lightly to the fence rail nearest her shoulder, still, its eyes half closed, breathing steadily. 2 weeks of rope, 2 weeks of saddle blankets and lunge lines and every technique 3 experienced horsemen possessed, and the animal had not let a single one of them get within 10 feet without exploding. And now it was standing at the fence, with its eyes half closed, pressed up against the rail, next to a woman who had not touched it and had not tried to touch it, and had not done one single thing that Douglas could identify as training. He stood at the fence for a long time, trying to understand what he had just watched happen. He could not find the framework for it. He went and found his senior ranch hand and told him what he had seen and asked him to come look. The ranch hand came and looked, and also did not have a framework for it. At the end of that afternoon, Douglas gathered a few of his men, and they stood at the fence and watched Shima and the stallion together. And Douglas said what he had been thinking since midday. She did not break it. The horse is still wild. He said it more than once. He said it with the particular frustration of a man who has recognized that something significant has happened in front of him, but cannot place it within any system he considers legitimate. So he has decided the thing itself must not count. Shima heard this. She was leaving the fence by then, walking back toward the south barn where her traveling companions were preparing to move on. She did not stop walking. But she turned her head, and she looked at Douglas for one moment, and she said 6 words. "That is why I did not break it." Then she continued walking. Douglas stood at the fence with those 6 words in the air, and the stallion standing calm and close behind him, and he felt something shift in his understanding, the way understanding sometimes shifts when a very obvious thing suddenly becomes visible from an angle you have never considered before and cannot unsee. What Shima had done was not a trick. It was not a technique in the way Douglas used the word technique. It was not a workaround for the problem of a horse that would not cooperate. It was something so different from his approach that it had been, until that moment, entirely invisible to him. Because his entire framework assumed that the goal was breaking, getting the animal past resistance, winning the confrontation until the horse accepted that cooperation was less costly than refusal. Shima's framework did not have breaking in it anywhere. She had not gone to the corral to take something from the horse. She had gone to the fence to offer something to it. Presence without demand. Company without condition. Time given freely, with no agenda attached and no expectation of return. Not the presence of someone managing a situation, but the presence of someone who genuinely did not need the situation to resolve itself in any particular way, and was therefore genuinely not a threat. The horse understood this within the first hour. Animals are better at reading intention than people are, because for animals, the reading of intention is a survival skill that they exercise constantly. The stallion had correctly assessed every man who entered that corral across 2 weeks. It had read the rope and the pressure and the advance, and correctly identified all of them as the same thing with a different surface. A request backed by force. Cooperate or be overcome. It had refused. It was right to refuse. Shima had come to the fence and offered something the horse had not encountered across those 14 days. Nothing. No rope, no pressure, no advance, no request. Just the quiet company of a person who appeared to have nowhere she needed to be and nothing she needed the horse to do. The Apache approach to horsemanship was built on this principle across generations of observation. Not because it was a philosophical preference for gentleness over toughness, but because it worked. Because a horse that has chosen to move toward you has resources available to it that a horse you have cornered and subdued does not. Because the partnership you build through presence is fundamentally different from the one you build through dominance, and the difference shows up in how the animal performs, how it tolerates difficulty, how it behaves when things go wrong in the field. Apache horsemanship was not considered inferior to anything in North America at the time. It was considered among the finest. Not despite the patience it required, because of it. Douglas knew none of this when Shima walked away, but he knew the horse was standing calm at the fence in a way it had never stood before. He knew that the animal had moved toward a person of its own accord for the first time across 2 weeks. And he knew, somewhere below the frustration and the confusion and the part of his brain that was still insisting this did not count because she had not broken anything, that he had just watched mastery. He worked with the stallion himself the next morning, going slowly and differently than he had planned. He did not enter the corral. He sat outside the fence the way Shima had sat, and he did not ask the horse for anything. The horse did not come to him that day. It came to him 3 days later. Douglas was at the fence in the early morning, and the stallion walked across the corral and stopped 6 feet away and looked at him and did not run. Douglas did not move. They stayed like that for a long while, two creatures in an early morning deciding what kind of relationship they were going to have. He thought about what Shima had said. "That is why I did not break it." He thought about what that sentence actually meant, not as a comment on technique, but as a comment on what the goal was in the first place. Because if the goal was a broken horse, then Shima had failed, and Douglas was right to say so. But if the goal was a horse that could genuinely work with you, that brought its full capacity and willingness to every task, then the question of what had been broken and what had been preserved changed everything. A horse you break has learned that resistance costs too much. It has not learned to trust you. Those are not the same animal. Douglas took 3 more weeks with the stallion, sitting outside the fence, offering presents without demand, learning the patience that he had always considered the thing you did before the real work started. He began to understand that the patience was the real work, that the patience was not the prelude, it was the whole thing. When the stallion finally let him in the corral, it was not defeat, it was a decision. Douglas worked that horse for years. He said he never worked a better one. He said he never forgot the woman who sat outside a fence for 4 hours and did nothing, and understood everything.